Activist who is a brain dead moron. That was the tweet by comedian turned intellectual firebrand Dave Smith, who Mark Pellegrino debated a few weeks ago. We did a show about that, thinking that is the last time we're going to talk about Dave Smith, but I, of course, had to go and tweet about him when he kind of sort of promoted somebody who is a Holocaust, not a Holocaust denier, a Holocaust forgiver. Let's call it that, or somebody who realizes, a historian who realized that the real problem with the Holocaust was not, the Nazis and what they did, but the guy who defeated the Nazis. Anyway, today we're gonna talk about Dave Smith, but not just specifically him, more this kind of style of debating, of arguing that is very popular on Twitter, where you call people names and and that's how you win. So when you Mark knows because Mark has like 500,000 followers. But for me, when I argue with somebody who also has around 500,000 followers on Twitter, it's not just that if they respond to me, it's not just them, it is their whole army that then comes after you. And then you get to see the kind of people who support such a person. So my tweet at him had 60 something replies. His tweet at me had another 118. And yeah, many of them echo his thoughts, if we can call it that, about me, and the way they're expressed also sound the same. All right, I'm going to go to somebody who exchanged more than one tweet each direction with Dave Smith, but actually spent a couple of hours trying to have a conversation with him. Mark Pellegrino. Mark, your thoughts on Dave's style of arguing, and yeah.
Yeah, Dave's style of arguing is not honest. It's he tries to play rhetorical tricks. He tries to decontextualize the things you say, then magnify that decontextualization to manipulate meanings that you never intended. And then he just keeps repeating those things over and over again, as if the repetition of them will impact the audience more than the actual truth of what you're saying. And he's right, because just look at the responses of his audience. They're adolescents. They're semi-brain dead. They're the types of people that you probably grew up with in high school that are still high school bound. They were probably bullies, ex-jocks in high school, who are now fat and unaccomplished and misanthropic people right now who can't really discuss concepts. I noticed that Dave has an issue with making analogies, drawing conclusions, connecting concepts. He's very concrete bound, and his style of argumentation is to say your thinking is unnuanced, cartoonish, and to talk over you. And his followers do pretty much the same thing. They mistake bloviating and talking for a long time with actually saying something. And they're as unversed, I would say, in this particular realm of Israeli history as Dave. Dave has read a lot of the new historians, or he's read, I think, only the new historians, with some Benny Morris thrown in, who I think roundly came against the new historians in his mistaken flirtation with that school for a while. But that's almost exclusively who he quotes. And he says the same things over and over again, no matter how many times he's refuted in other arguments with people. He just uses the same arguments, recycles them over and over again, as if the debate isn't an actual conversation where two sides are potentially presenting concepts that people can learn from. He's just trying to win and score. That's all he cares about, is scoring and winning. He doesn't really care about concepts or truth.
So, Richard, last week there was an episode of the reality show. You were not on it, but we were talking about Bassem Youssef, another comedian turned anti-Israel intellectual. And Jonathan Hoenig was on that episode, and he mentioned, this is another person that we're talking about that I haven't heard of until this conversation. Now, there, he's very famous. Jonathan is just selective in a good way. I think you're probably also selective in a good way, and I'm not sure if you had followed Dave Smith's career up until this, the editorial board of ARCUK decided to make him a regular feature here.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up, I think. I think there was an episode that we did based or recently on the debate that Mark had with Dave Smith, a follow-up one. I think we were on that episode, if I remember rightly. Although what I've watched and what I'm on, I can never quite remember because I'm still, mouthing off at the screen sometimes. But yeah, absolutely. I think that the point here in this type of argument is, just because social media is a tool doesn't mean you have to be. And that does tend to sucker people in, I think, a lot of the time. I think people are also, even better people, can often pick up the tone of all of the morons online and then get suckered into imitating that tone and reflecting it back at them, as opposed to keeping on the argument, as opposed instead of the ad hominem and all of the other sarcasm, etc., which has its place. But is not the whole story. And of course, it's not only who you're debating with, it's also the audience, the silent audience who are coming across this tweet and seeing it. And that's when you want to maintain some dignity. You want to maintain the core of your argument, really, isn't it? You don't want it to look like two people wrestling in the mud. You want to get across a decent argument with a decent set of premises, leading to a decent set of conclusions. And I think the problem here with people like Dave Smith is they're always leaping in midstream, or they're giving a superficial analysis of an outcome to something without looking at all the premise and all the steps that led up to it, and then contrasting that outcome with some other completely disconnected outcome and claiming that they're the same thing, which often is the way to expose the fact that they're on shaky ground to start with.
Back during the Attitude Era in WWE, people wrestled in the mud, and it was much better than anything I've seen from Dave Smith. Just wanted to make that point. Marco.
But it was. I wanted to extend my official congratulations to ARCUK for introducing me. Thanks to introducing me to this guy, who turned out he's supposed to be a comedian, but I don't find it particularly funny. But again, perhaps it's just me being a miserable git. And certainly, I wouldn't rate him an intellectual at all, despite the fact that he likes to promote himself as such. I haven't seen much debating from his side, besides the monologue he had with Mark. I wonder if he could actually win a debate if the moderator weren't totally on his side, and therefore, shutting up the other side, like it happened with the debate with Mark as well. I think it's a very lazy, parroting kind of person. He doesn't seem to have an idea or why he has an argument, but he seems to follow his own argument. He's made he's reached his conclusion, and he's gonna, whatever happens, gonna go with it. And it doesn't matter what the other person says or what the facts tell him, he will still carry on with that. But to call himself intellectual, I think is particularly dishonest, because you don't have any excuse in this day and age to deny the Holocaust. You don't have any excuse in this day and age, with all the facts and all the information available to your fingertip, not to know what's actually happened. But instead, you choose to ignore the facts and go down the route of some guy whom you might like or not. But you cannot choose which side to belong to. And that kind of feeds into the fact he seems to like the kind of anarchic capitalism side of things, which says a lot about him. And however you Mark tried to challenge or facts challenge him, he will never admit to be wrong. He will never admit that in some instances government can do good things, because doing that will be effectively undermining all the stuff he believes in. and therefore admitting to himself is wrong. These kind of people are too afraid to face reality, and they will never accept the fact, even if you stick it under their noses.
Thank you, Ashley Shrugged, for the super chat. Ashley says, Dave has constipation of the brain and diarrhea of the mouth. He just repeats garbage loud enough to drown out his opponent and claim victory. Big loser. Well, what Dave has that's great is a microphone that Mark, you should that's the one thing you should copy from him. Yeah, he that definitely helped him in that debate.
Hey, well, I've been invited to something in February, some freedom thing in February, so I'm sure I'm gonna see him in person. And we'll see how he is.
Do you want to tell us what that freedom thing is, or are you worried?
I can't remember right now. I'd have to look at my DMs, but I've been invited, and they're gonna fly me out too. So fly me and
Is
my
it in
wife
DC
out.
by any chance?
I think it is.
Oh, I know that freedom thing. I might be
Yeah, so I'll go there and raise hell, and if Dave wants to raise hell with me while I'm there, face to face, I'm in.
I think the Athletics Commission hasn't yet allowed MMA in the District of Columbia, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
but he can't bring his friend Joe into it. Joe's good. I love Joe.
Who's Joe?
Even though Joe Rogan, even though he's got some crazy points of view, he's a great martial artist, and I enjoy his commentary, his color commentary.
Will agree to disagree. I mean, I'm not talking about actually his commentary on UFC, but his commentary on his podcast too often agrees with whatever crazy ideas the guest might have. But what I would love to see is Mark Pellegrino on Joe Rogan. That is an episode that I think we'd all like to see. People in the chat, let Joe Rogan know. He had Dave Smith on, so come on.
They're friends, but they were on the comedy circuit together, so that just kind of goes without saying, even though Joe's funnier than Dave.
I hope so.
All right. Okay. So on the topic of Marco, you brought up Dave's philosophy, if we want to call it that. There's an article by Alejandro on our Substack. You can go read that now if you're watching this recorded like a day or so after we live stream it, because it's not on yet, but I am going to read part of it. And I'm going to start with a couple of quotes that Alejandro provides here that really explain Dave Smith better than Dave Smith can explain himself. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat.
Well, that's not surprising. Dave Smith has zero capacity for introspection, so I definitely like to hear the analysis.
So by the way, the whole article does mention Dave Smith as well, and gets into the details, but it's more generally about libertarianism. And again, I'm reading from somewhere in the middle, and I'm reading some quotes. So it says, in the words of Argentine President Javier Milei, quote, "It's important to say that there is, on the one hand, anarcho-capitalism that is the theoretical framework of Murray Rothbard, such as a regulatory framework, a guidance. On the other hand, there is the real world. The question is how to bring such a regulatory framework into reality. Philosophically, I'm an anarcho-capitalist, but in real life, I'm a minarchist, meaning that the only function of the state is to provide defense and justice." And then it continues, or economist Juan Ramon Rayo, a famous libertarian economist, quote, "I consider myself a philosophical anarchist, meaning that I don't assign any political legitimacy to the government. At the same time, one must consider the viability of a stateless society. For instance, I don't recognize any legitimacy for criminals to commit crimes, and I'd love to live in a society without crime, and therefore the fight is to minimize crime, although sadly it's likely that there will always be crime. The government has a similar case. I consider myself a political minarchist, hoping to minimize the state to its smallest expression." And then Alejandro provides his commentary saying, in other words, if you can take a decision to reduce the size of the government, do it. If not, be aware that this is a process. This is similar to environmentalists who want to reduce the impact of human beings on Earth. Their end goal is to take the impact to zero, but given that they are gracious enough to let us live for now, they begrudgingly allow for some imprints of ourselves in nature while still opposing it. Yeah, I mean, I think the analogy with environmentalism is great. And those quotes are great. Millet, who again, I think is certainly better than most leaders, if not all leaders in the world at the moment. The fact that he and Rayo both say, look, philosophically, I'm on the side of something that in reality I don't believe can exist tells you what the libertarian ideology is in a nutshell. They have ideas that they don't think are practicable in reality, and it leads them in all sorts of directions. And in the case of Dave Smith, it leads him to support terrorists, stateless terrorists in a sense, against the state of Israel, who in his debate with Mark, he kept saying that it's a state that violates rights, which is such a bizarre thing to say in support of the Palestinians who want a state that doesn't defend any rights of its citizens.
Right, and he couldn't understand that for him all states are criminal institutions, and for him documents like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, or even Israel's Declaration of Independence, where they deliberately put in their founding documents the idea that all citizens of Israel, particularly religious and ethnic minorities, would be equal, mean nothing. So we know now that Dave does not respect contracts. He doesn't respect agreements between people. He doesn't understand their significance in the government. So, like I said, these guys are they're concrete bound, and they just admit in this writing that their philosophy is impracticable. And so what good is the philosophy if it can't be applied in the real world?
Richard.
Yes, and I just want it to work. Outlook, isn't it? I don't care how. I don't understand how. I just want it subjectively to work for me, and just to be able to pull it off. And of course, that's just it's a loose argument. It doesn't hold anything. It's just really depressing to see that. And of course, so many people, no matter what they're defending, even if they're defending the right kind of arguments, if they're defending capitalism, defend it from the same kind of dodgy format, don't they? Where they apologetically defend it. They stick the butt in there in the middle, instead of a full-throated defense that's based on a moral starting point. And of course, if you haven't got a moral starting point, you're not going to get to the full argument, which is where they fall down. That's what you see all the time.
And I think Mark's point about this guy is totally concrete bound is the key of the problem with him. These kind of people, what do we mean with concrete bound? We mean that these kind of people take an event, totally take it out of the context in which it arose in the first place, and then they start making a series of statements based on that event or fact alone. So that's why you have this kind of attitude towards Ukraine, for example. People say, "Oh yeah, but Russia is not in the right because Ukraine is not the perfect state. They're corrupt, blah blah blah." Yes, Ukraine is a borderline failed state. It's totally corrupt, and the president of the United States knows very well why Ukraine is corrupt, given he's made money out of it. But it doesn't matter. The point is that you don't go around as a state invading other state. You have a sovereign state who's been invaded by some guy who likes to play KGB and old USSR. So yes, Ukraine is not perfect, but the wrong is on the side of the people who actually invade the country.
What I found particularly ironic about Dave is the guy who hates states, period, who thinks no state is legitimate. Yet when I said that a state that does not respect individual rights can make no claims to a right to exist or can make no claims to sovereignty, and a state that does respect individual rights could, if it chose, invade that state, he went off the rail. He didn't understand that concept at all. And he turned it into, so you're saying that a state that says they respect rights can go in and murder babies. That's the kind of sophistry that went on through the entire debate. which is just simply dishonest. It's an attempt to score points, not an attempt to understand the other person's point of view and or progress the conversation. My motivation was not just to defend Israel. It was also to try to push the liberty movement in a direction that it should go, because I actually feel like this is the hill that the liberty movement dies on, to be perfectly honest with you, because they're exposing all of their intellectual flaws in throwing their weight behind the grift of the Palestinian identity over Israel. And it's really despicable. And maybe it's a good thing. Maybe they need to go they give up the ghost and give real capitalists a chance at turning the liberty movement around.
Yeah, well, until they understand that what's behind capitalism is actually a morality, an objective theory of values behind it. It's not up to the person, or it's not an intrinsic thing. It's about morality. It's about why is it right for men to be free. They haven't got an answer because, as I was saying earlier on, they just analyze facts independently. That's why Ukraine and Israel are, to their mind, are two different cases. One is bad, the other one is good, or the other one is not very good, but the other one is definitely bad. So they see the Palestinians, a made-up state, a state that doesn't exist, as a good guy, because there isn't a state in the mind, even though it's there. It's called the Hamas. But hey, and the fact that Israel is the moral agent between the two sides, it totally passes by them. They are unable to see what the principle behind the actual facts. Why, if you're on the side of civilization, you will have to be on the side of Israel. They don't see that, because all they stop that state, non-state, state must be bad. They just don't make the connection.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I also want people to know from the note from Razi, I'm not petting my dog and I'm not doing something weird. I have a sore muscle that I'm rubbing out. So it looks weird, but I'm just trying to rub out a little soreness. Yeah, these people are sort of like as concrete bound as the anti-gun people. And I've brought this up to them several times and they don't seem to be able to draw the connection. You know, people who think that guns are bad. Well, no, guns are they're dangerous. They have the potential to be dangerous. It just depends on the values of the person who is wielding the gun. And likewise, since government is force, a monopoly on force, it can be dangerous. And so, like fire or electricity or any tool that we use, nuclear power, fossil fuels, all of these things that tremendously advance our lives have dangerous elements to them if they're misused. And if the people using them have terrible values, of course, they can use them to harm people. A government with the proper values, meaning individual rights centered, which I never hear libertarians talking about a society based on individual rights ever. They boil everything down to economics. And if only you just let people be free to trade in everything, then you'll have a paradise. Absolutely not the case, particularly if individual rights is not the express grounding moral principles upon which the society is based.
Yeah, James Valiant says in the chat, rub out, unfortunate choice of words. Yeah, by the way, that was a private note to Mark, just so that
it was a private note, and we shared laughter. You saw me laughing. It was funny, but I thought the same thing when I was doing it, that other people might be thinking something funny was going on, and so I wanted to make the announcement.
No, that kind of content we put behind a paywall. You don't get it for free on YouTube. Thank you,
on my
Ashley.
OnlyFans. It's on my OnlyFans.
Thank you, Ashley Shrugged, for the super chat. Ashley says Dave is a master context dropper and word twister. Yeah.
I don't even think he's a master. I just think he's a bloviating cunt, to be honest with you. But he's not a master at it. He could be stopped if you have the right referee there. I mean, all he did was he replayed Schenk. What's his name? Schenk Uyghur. He just
Yeah.
did a Shank. All Shank does is sit there with his frog face and bully people and yell and scream and bloviate. Says nothing. It's all a bunch of bullshit. But if you have a good moderator that can shut him up, let the other person answer, limit answers like they do in presidential debates to 1 minute or 30 seconds at a time so that people can digest what's being said. And so that the debaters can digest what's being said. That's the way normal debates are run. Then he can't. Then his typical you know teenage style of argumentation wouldn't go anywhere.
Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. There's another comment I want to address here, and then I want to get to some of the comments of Dave's fans on our Twitter spat. So there's a comment asking, Razi, do you actually believe Dave Smith is an anti-Semite? You actually didn't say he was in the tweet. I mean, I did. I did say he was an anti-Semite. But again, like I've been making this point when it comes to Israel, the fact that people have a specific problem of all the countries, of all the war zones in the world, just with Israel, and make it their issue makes me suspicious of their motives. And again, yeah, it's somebody who is Jewish who does that. It makes you wonder a little bit more. But yes, my point was yeah, what he said in that tweet promoting the Twitter thread of what's his name again? The Cooper guy.
Jay something's in.
Daryl or something.
Yeah, Daryl Cooper, who was on Tucker Carlson's show, the Twitter thread that said, yeah, that Churchill was the bad guy in World War II. That
Oh yeah. I think I saw this thing.
yeah, it's
Oh
a
my
whole
God.
thread, and he says something to the effect of the Nazis weren't planning on exterminating people, but they had too many people in the camps, and they didn't have the capacity to deal with that, and
Oh my
millions
God,
ended
this
up
is
dead.
utter nonsense. I mean, and they're also trying to use the fact that Zionists attempted to negotiate with the Nazis and a transfer deal. They're trying to use that to vilify Zionism, and that they were trying to connect with Nazis when they were actually just trying to protect the Jewish population in Europe, protect their assets, and bring them over here. And they didn't want to. They were trying not to rock the boat. I mean, it's. These people are just shameless in the way that they are now revising history to make Hitler and the Nazis the good guys, the misunderstood people, and the Jews the evil ones. I mean, this is sick beyond belief. I never thought I would see this. I never, ever in a million years thought I would see this as on the scale that it's happening today.
And thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Jonathan says Dave is too ignorant to be so smug. Well, they often do go hand in hand. And Yotam says about Dave, he's an as a Jew, which is very, very well put. Yeah. Okay, so here's one of the first replies on Dave's tweet, quote tweeting me and saying, "Oh, look, another objectivist who is a brain dead moron." There's this tweet makes more of an attempt at an argument than Dave did, but it says objectivists are the ultimate hypocrites. On the one hand, they fully accept that freedom is everything, yet they manage to defend the idea of a coercive monopoly state. I mean, this is a better attempt at an argument than what Dave did in his tweet to me, but it's very similar to the attempted arguments that Dave did in his debate with Mark, which was basically very much an hour and a half, much of which was Dave explaining objectivism to Mark and to the world, and he had a version of it that was not the same as Ayn Rand's. Let's call it that.
Of course, he definitely demonstrated that he hasn't really thoroughly read Ayn Rand.
That's the generous way of putting it. The less generous is he had read Ayn Rand, but he
He read the
once
Cliff Note. He read the Cliff Notes version, or he probably read somebody else's interpretation of Ayn Rand. I don't think he actually read her books or thought about them himself.
possibly. Richard.
And isn't that the standard, one of two camps that criticism of Rand falls into? Is it either a skim-read, surface-level misunderstanding, or it's an intentional deception that tries to twist it into something that the person knows was never the case in the first place? Those are the standard two prongs that people use. I think, I mean, I mentioned earlier that he often takes a superficial analysis of an outcome, and this was particularly apparent in that discussion about the Second World War, and the fact that the Second World War lasted many years and led to a lot of death, and that was terrible. He takes that as the outcome, and therefore we should, working back from that, have stopped allowing Hitler to have Poland, and then what? There's always this belief that he knows what would have happened in some alternative scenario, having known what turned out in the real world several years later. It's a sort of standard of omniscience that he's working to, that nobody has at the time, and also doesn't take into account.
Wait, he's saying that we should have let Hitler have Poland?
Yeah, and stopped at that, and then done a deal. In the same way that presumably Israel should do a deal with Hamas.
Did Neville Chamberlain try that? And didn't that lead directly to Poland being attacked?
You and your facts. I mean,
okay, whatever.
And I think what you were saying earlier, Mark, I think is interesting here is when you are talking to somebody, if your own outlook on life is that people are benevolent, you want to take people who you think could reach you and are sort of vaguely on the right hill somewhere, even if they're they're fighting shadows. You want to at least open up a discussion with them, don't you? And of course that is often a tough ask, isn't it? Particularly when their desire is just to block, just to hide, just to repeat their initial talking points anyway, and not to listen at any point. Is the desire in a discussion to understand your opponent and then, counter them with your own arguments, or is the desire to humiliate them? Is that the start?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, a debate is a competition between ideas, and certainly the desire is to win the debate, but win the debate at what cost? By sacrificing your integrity, by scoring rhetorical points, by sophistry, by not being honest, by misrepresenting your opponent's perspective, or by trying to present the facts as they are and keeping the discussion as principled as possible. So I prefer the latter. Dave takes the Schenck side of things and just tries to appear to win and to score points.
And of course, they've also got their horde of supporters as well, who are cheering from the right.
Spike the football. They all spike the football, and they give the general impression that that something happened that didn't happen. In fact, one of his idiot followers tried to demonstrate one of my worst points in the debate, where I made a comment and then Dave interrupted me. And they just kept the camera on Dave, even though in the debate you could probably see all of us. And you can hear me attempting to interrupt Dave. You can hear me trying to answer his accusation, none of which get through. His microphone completely overpowered mine. So all you hear is his, which essentially put, if you weren't paying attention that there were answers to what he was saying, gave the impression that he scored some kind of point when he actually didn't. It was and when I brought that up to the person, they didn't speak anymore. Because usually when you bring a point up like that exposes their own dishonesty, they tend to shut up. And at least on Twitter, Dave can't interrupt me. So there's times when we've been discussing on Twitter and he just won't answer. When I get him in a position where he can't answer without admitting that he's wrong, he just doesn't answer.
Marco.
Yeah, well, first of all, it kind of his reply to you, Razi. The fact he calls you objectivist, you should be quite proud of it, to be honest. He recognizes that on the other side there's somebody he can't really fight against because he knows he hasn't got the intellectual power behind him. He hasn't got the the integrated philosophy behind it. He cannot explain the things he believes. I use that word on purpose because he doesn't know stuff, he believes stuff. So it goes on the attack, and it's easier to dismiss somebody in the same way people say, oh, I read Ayn Rand. Yeah, you might have read it, but you have to understand it. And surely if you read Ayn Rand, you would immediately understand what she's all about. And that's why lots of people are threatened by Ayn Rand's writing. That's why in the second-hand bookshop of Edinburgh University, Ayn Rand books are destroyed, are burnt, they're not put on sale again because they realize, they know perfectly well where the threat of to their make-believe existence comes from somebody who advocates use your brain to understand what's out there, to understand reality. And you cannot counter with your make-believe arguments if somebody tells you that. So they see a threat. And then, I mean, the comment you just read, for objectivists, freedom is everything. Well, first of all, it goes to show you don't understand what freedom is, where it comes from. Freedom is only in a social context because, a human being on a desert island doesn't need freedom. So that's
yeah. I mean, that's funny that they demonstrate by that concept in itself their own weakness, because for them freedom is everything. Actually, for objectivists, reason is everything, and our social system, our ethics, all revolve around the epistemology of reason, as far as I understand it. You can tell me if I'm in error, but it seems like for libertarians, freedom is everything. They don't even consider reason isn't even a part of the equation, and that's why individual rights isn't a part of the equation, and that's why they don't understand the concept of monopoly force, and they don't understand the justification for a state.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's exactly the point. They don't have the justification of why freedom is important in a social context, because they don't understand where it comes from. They don't know what individual rights are. They don't know what rights are. They don't know what morality is. That's why they apply things to similar events. They apply different analysis to them. That's why Ukraine and Israel are two different things in their mind, because they don't see what the principle behind is. And that's part of the reason why, if somebody believes in freedom, or if somebody wants freedom, like objectivism argues, certainly wouldn't argue for a coercive government, because coercion is against freedom. So unless you are a total lunatic psychopath who entertains two conflicting ideas, you will never go down that route. And they know that objectivism, Ayn Rand, has got the answers to this kind of questions. But
I also think their failure to understand ethics or rational ethics, or the place of reason in human life, is one of the reasons they're constantly advocating for vices. They never talk about virtues. It's always about, we need to smoke pot, we need our psilocybin, it's always about what vices, prostitution, yada yada, all that stuff, which of course objectivists think should be legal as well, because we're volitional people. But we don't focus on that. It's because liberty is a means to rational action. It's primarily for the people who want to be producers and productive and live happy, thriving lives.
Yeah, they don't concern themselves with ethics. They take an already ready-made ethics off the shelf religion, and they go with it. It's good enough for them. But that's the problem.
Thank you, Christian, for the super chat. Christian says, the man responsible for ANCAP nonsense is Hans Hermann Hoppe, who preferred monarchy to modern democracy, once a student of the leftist Habermas. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Thank you, Frank, for the super chat. Frank says, can't take care of Jews in camps, let them leave. I mean, I don't know if these people's arguments deserve that kind of let's talk about it. Let's see if this is but
let's not legitimize the stupidity by actually entertaining it.
Yeah, although I am going to legitimize some other stupidity by entertaining it, by reading some more comments. Not necessarily, yeah, I don't want to call it stupidity because I don't want to let these people off the hook. They are responsible for using their mind in the way that you're about to hear. So these are some more comments on Dave Smith's Twitter response to me. One says, self-proclaimed objectivist. How ironic. Keep rocking, Dave Smith. Another says, it's insane how anti-Semitism is the woke word of the year. And then another says,
What?
I don't know. I don't know how many of the woke crowd would accept that, but
I think I
uh,
understand what that argument is. It's the shutting down debate argument, isn't it? You can't say anything because you're an anti-Semite. You can't say anything because you can't criticize trans people. It's the same category in their concrete bound minds.
um,
I hate to explain it, but I think that that's the irrationality at play.
and thank you, Alejandro, for the super chat. Alejandro says, thanks for quoting me. Yeah, thank you for the article, which again, our viewers who are not watching live can read now, and the viewers who are watching live can read soon. Somebody here said, Yaron taught me that objectivism is just a subset of Zionism / boomer truth, which is one word, but the different words are capitalized. His overriding preferences are always demonstrated, whether on Israel or Ukraine. First of all, it's always a compliment to be mentioned in the context of your own but yeah, it's interesting. By the way, this is the only person who capitalized the O in objectivism, so that's the positive there. But yeah, I think whenever major things happen in the world, the objectivist movement kind of gets better because it sheds some some excess weight. And the fact that there are people within the movement who consider themselves within the movement who are not clear on why they should support Ukraine and or Israel. I don't know who this person is. They don't use a real name, but yeah, I think that's always a positive, and well done to Yaron for convincing that guy to go elsewhere. Richard, you look like you have something to say.
Well, I was just thinking that when he talks about Zionism and boomer truth, I'm always amazed at how often these libertarians talk in collectivist groups all the time. They're always creating these imaginary groups and dumping people into them at every occasion. They're never thinking as individuals, and that's an awful lot of what happens on towards the alt-right end of the spectrum, isn't it? They always think there's some sort of dark forces within a group, and that everybody represents them, and that's also explains their reaction to Jews, isn't it? They're always that they are anti-government but pro-business, except that business is part of some big cabal all run by the Jews. So again, it becomes collective before you know where you are. So it's depressing.
Should I read a couple more and then we'll continue? Because again, like these people, they're not just fans of Dave Smith. They do actually learn from the guy, as you can see from some more of these tweets. This is somebody saying objectivists, and then there's a quote. The following is a quote supposedly by objectivists. We're actually the only free thinkers in this society, and we're here to tell you that the American regime has never done anything wrong. Also, BDSM is the only rational form of sex. Well, the last point, as I mentioned, is available in our behind the paywall content, but it's nice when people quote, like this guy is actually quoting and goes through a whole list of things that you've never heard any objectivist say. Yeah.
I mean, they're not connected to reality. They're just not in reality. What can you say to a comment like that? I mean, Ayn Rand had in her collection of letters from the 1960s. It's critique after critique after critique about America. She has whole books that are critiques of American policy. just because she loved the country for its basic principles didn't mean that she wasn't one of the most astute critics of pretty much everything that was going on culturally and politically in this country. And to claim that we as objectivists just accept what's happening in America is the dumbest comment ever. Can you please publicize this person's handle so I can beat them within an inch of their life on Twitter?
Well, I don't want to name a troll publicly here, but I can send you a message.
Thank you.
Marco, any thoughts before I read a couple more?
Yeah, well, I just think all these people supporting the libertarian cause in a sense, especially making a comment like that, it to me betrays some sort of mysticism behind. Effectively, they believe that liberty is good in the same way as God is good. So everything descends from it. They don't argue or analyze what's going on, but they just accept something which is good, then they run with it. Whether it works or not, whether it leads you to destruction, whether it leads you to Nazism or communism, it doesn't matter. We believe it's good, so we go. Ridiculous.
All right, a couple more.
Yes, and then I have to go. I've got about 5 minutes.
All right. So another one says, I don't recall objectivism accepting the premise of racialism. Seems like an Randian objectivist would not throw around the term anti-Semite unless they were a deeply unserious person. Again, this is a comment in reply to Dave Smith's tweet at me saying, look, another objectivist brain dead moron. And then the next one, also in reply to that tweet, says, you've been the most fair and objective voice on every topic. No one has been able to refute you, so they resort to name calling. Keep telling the truth. Big fan.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even understand the first comment. I mean, it's as if Rand didn't recognize there was such a thing as racism. It's as if saying anti-Semitism isn't a concept. That it's what does it mean? Of course it's a concept. Of course racism is a concept. Of course it's a sort of variation on racism. And so what are they trying to say? Do you understand what they're trying to say?
No, but maybe Richard does.
No, I'm not sure I do, to be honest. I think it's assuming that every time you refer to a group at all, that you're invalid, utterly, just because you've mentioned a group.
That's it.
And that's it. Yeah, yeah. So
but anti-Semitism, it says it's saying that you clearly have a double standard when you're talking about Jewish people as opposed to other people. You have a different moral standard that you apply to Jewish people than you do to other people. That's primarily what makes people anti-Semitic, in the same way that somebody judges the moral character of somebody else by the color of their skin. It's a variation of that kind of collectivism. So it's a concept, it exists, it's real, it's a category, we're naming it. Yeah, but they do have this thing, this obsession which of course they lose with the Jews, where a single Jew is an avatar for every Israeli that ever existed. But with the Palestinians, you have to be nuanced, because of course it's not, the entire culture isn't a collective. You can't consider them a collective. I mean, this is a culture that almost uniquely you can consider as a collective, because they've expressed their more or less the high percentage of support for the kind of murderous pathological attitudes that pervade their culture. It's not collectivism to look at a culture as pathological, if it's pathological.
And it's a misunderstanding of individualism, utterly, isn't it? It assumes that every objectivist is a little objectivist sitting on his own little desert island, only talking to another one individual sitting on their desert island. And as soon as they depart from that, they've violated the entire philosophy, which would make it a ludicrous philosophy, were that the case. But of course, that's just a total misrepresentation.
It's so concrete. They just can't get out of their concrete bound pit.
I particularly like the term Randian objectivist. Like objectivism is something that has got different currents or lines of thought. These people believe that if you offend Ayn Rand, I'm gonna take it personally. Well, actually, Ayn Rand tells you to use your mind to know the world out there. So, and it ends there. Effectively, that's the very essence of objectivism. Use your mind. And these people really think that by being mean to Ayn Rand, we're gonna get hurt. Like, get a life.
Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Jonathan says this is a great panel. Thank you. It's missing Jonathan Honig, but we will have you on sometime in the next few days. I don't know when, but Daniel knows. I think this is a nice comment to end with. Somebody says in response to Dave Smith's tweet, the worst part of these Ayn Rand groups, the members, objective up until Israel. I'm also a Rand fan and have turned many people onto her philosophy. I'm sure you have. I'm sure they're fantastic people. And if you want to be part of the worst part of these Rand groups, make sure you become a member. There's a link in the live chat and in the description to become a member of the Ayn Rand Center UK. You get to spend more time with us than the people who are not members. Because we have additional content, we have our WhatsApp groups, and you get to support our work and make libertarians angry. So I think it's worth the money. It's worth the £10, the £500, or anywhere in between. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Any parting thoughts?
Well, no, I know this battle between libertarians and objectivists are going to continue, and I have total confidence that the most rational side will win eventually.
Yeah, and the social media will continue to be a morass of idiocy all over the place. It always strikes me as it's like Alexis Colby and Crystal Carrington pulling each other's hair and thinking they're two alpha males fighting, and they're not.
And for the love of God, call me brain dead moron as much as you like, but read Ayn Rand and then come back to me.
And
Indeed.
Dave Smith's fans who have been watching this show and are sad that it's over so soon, don't worry. We are back tomorrow with this show, the reality show, and before it with our 30-minute show, The Daily Objective, which is on 7 days a week. The reality show is only on 5 days a week, but there are many past episodes which you can enjoy if you've just found us. So I encourage you to subscribe and watch the channel regularly. Thanks, guys, for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
Bang.